Yes, rain interrupted proceedings at Silverstone on Friday, but it wasn't enough to distract the eagle eye of Craig Scarborough when it came to looking for the latest upgrades. Scarbs, so what did we see at Silverstone today? Obviously wet in the first session, so a little bit difficult to get really proper evaluation of where we're going, but how did it look from your perspective?
It's quite interesting. I mean, it's a very different circuit. It's a very high energy circuit. You've got these fast corners, you've got the long straights, but it's very smooth. The curbs are very flat. We didn't see the level of porpoising that perhaps we've seen at other circuits. We did exhibit it on some of the cars and in certain situations, but by and large it looks like it's a track where the field is coming together much more. You're seeing the raw performance rather than the handicap performance. I think it's maybe the best way of putting it. It'll be interesting to see how FP3 quali plays out, particularly because it's very gusty here. It's been quite cool. Potentially race day could be much hotter. So yeah, it's going to be interesting how everything evolves from what has been a fairly slow start.
I'm interested to know from with your eye, can you notice if they're raising or lowering ride heights?
It's something that I'm looking at really, really carefully across the board to see where the teams are at and see the sort of the altitude the cars are running at, how they're cornering, what they're like on the straights, what they're like in the slow corners, which gives you that kind of maximum height. And it varies across the field, and it varies even with a car a lot between different circumstances. So you will see, like the Ferrari and the Red Bull in particular seem to be very high off the ground. Literally, you can see clear air underneath them. But once they're running, the Ferrari comes very tail down, it's very close to the track. The Red Bull seems to flatten out a lot better as it builds up speed. The downforce squashes the car across. The Mercedes seems just to constantly drag along the ground, and even though it seems to improve slightly, it's painful to see the car literally running across the track like that. So yeah, I think this is something that teams are kind of stuck with this year. And I think what we'll find, particularly with some of the aero concepts as well, is that will change over the winter. It just doesn't seem possible with the current regulations, with money, wind tunnel time and everything else, to get big changes made through the season. So I think a lot of teams are just trying to make do as best they can with these issues.
So what caught your eye today in terms of upgrades?
Well, I mean, there was upgrades literally at each end of the pit lane. Far end of the pit lane, it has to be said, was Williams, who with Albon's car have got the big update. Now it's more than just the side pods, although it's the side pods that grab your attention. They've gone away from these odd little mini pods which kind of puzzled us pre-season. Certainly haven't paid off for Williams. They've now gone to a much more conventional side pod. Everybody's arguing, is it an Alpine side pod, is it a Red Bull side pod, a Ferrari side pod? It's just very, very conventional. It's got aspects of lots of teams' features in it. They've changed the floor, they've changed loads of other bits and pieces across the car. Too early to say how well that's working, but it's good to see that Williams have been able to pull this big update out. Up at the sharper end of the grid, Mercedes, big update. It may not look like it, and it's not the big side pod upgrade that everyone keeps expecting, which I don't personally believe is going to come. I don't think that is the root of their problems. But their update, from front to rear, there's bits and pieces changing. They've changed the end plates. They've got these very clever surfaces they've added over the front suspension where it mounts to the chassis, which creates a lot more downwash. The little fins in front of the side pods create more downwash. The floor edge, and potentially a lot more under the floor, completely different, way more complicated than we've seen. It's very similar in lots of respects to what McLaren have been doing in this area. So big update for them. Ferrari a little bit more muted, some subtle changes, some wing mirror changes, which I thought were going to catch on in terms of questions about legality much more, but doesn't seem to have appeared. We go to Red Bull. They've got really the big thing there is their top body side pods. And it's not so much that the side pods have really changed, but how the hot air comes out of them and out that big cannon exit at the back. That's been lifted up, been made much squarer, particularly the top. It's very flat, and you now have the cooling outlets on the top of that as well. Very radical, lets a lot more air hit the beam wing, so that's really interesting. And then you really reach lots of the other teams, which have all got just lots of little bits and pieces. So it's interesting, much like we had back in Barcelona. Silverstone is the track that everyone's decided to bring lots of bits and pieces. We could be here all day kind of detailing everything, but everyone's brought something, bar maybe just one or two teams.
Where do you think we're going now with the FIA technical directive on vertical oscillation and impacts?
I think that's interesting. I'm hearing stories going both directions, where it's been kind of parked, it's going to be dealt with team by team, or it's going to come back like we saw with the FIA press release. So the answer is I don't know where it's at. Only the FIA and the teams know where it's at. It's interesting to hear some of the propaganda coming and going. People talking about, vertical Gs of 10G, which is nothing that I've seen on any data presented by anyone in terms of porpoising or bouncing. In terms of if they hit something, maybe they do get 10G, but certainly from what I've seen, it's 1 to 2G is the peak that we're seeing, and I think that is what they're going to try and eradicate, and that will vary by circuit, and it's going to be tricky to get that whole debate going over a weekend to set the limits, to apply the limits to the teams to be able to respond realistically. And what would happen if a team isn't able to kind of dial out this porpoising? The FIA say that they reserve the right to add 10 millimetres of ride height, and that's a lot. These cars are only a few centimetres, off the ground, especially this year. But equally, the suspension is not designed to just be kind of jacked up by as much as a centimetre and still have full movement. So that's going to be a big issue. Or they can actually stop a car running, kind of an immediate black and orange flag, which would be a very radical approach for the FIA to take to a team. So I'd love to know what's going on. I'd love to be on the fly on all of these meetings. But as I stand at the moment is that they're just going to keep monitoring it, setting some standards, and only then will we see what action gets taken. And I think there'll be fireworks if action is taken for any team at any circuit we've got coming up.
Can Ferrari take it to Red Bull this weekend?
I think of all the circuits, this is potentially the circuit where Ferrari could shine. If you look at some of the upcoming races, I think the big differentiator will be potentially the weather. Not so much rain and wind, but certainly temperature. It's been very cool here at Silverstone, very low track temperatures. I think that could play into Ferrari's hands. They certainly seem to suffer that little bit more degradation in the race than Red Bull are able to run with. And that means that Red Bull get that advantage later in the race. And interesting, so do Mercedes. Despite all the other problems, the late stages of the races seems to be the point where you really see that Mercedes flying. So I think there's everything to race for this weekend. In terms of the best race car, I still think it would be the Red Bull. Qualifying, I think it would be Ferrari. And how it actually shakes out in a race, even in perfect conditions, it's very tight. And again, you've got that question about reliability, which has affected so much of that Red Bull Ferrari fight through the early part of the season, even up to the last race. So I think there's everything to play for, and who gets that third podium position I think would be almost impossible to predict at this stage. It could be any number of 6 to 8 drivers.
And there was time at the back end of FP2 for all the key runners to be out there doing some fuel runs as well. So that's the significant thing about Friday, I think, to have a look at those times. It bears out basically what Craig was saying about how close it is. But you can see there was a wide range of tyres being used, the soft and the medium on the two Ferraris. Good to see them splitting their options there. Red Bull ran the soft tyre on both cars, and Mercedes also splitting their options. Lewis on the medium, but in this case, George on the hard tyre, so full range. If you look at the times there, Carlos Sainz, very impressive on the soft tyre and showing that there's a longevity in that tyre as well. Very impressive to see that. If you compare his times 33.6, 33.0, you could say, wow, he's ahead of Max Verstappen at the moment. Max didn't do anything like the same number of laps, seemed to be working away with perhaps some of those revisions we were talking about on the Red Bull. So we can't really make a comment about how quick the Red Bull is going to be tomorrow, but let's wait and see. But at the moment, out of the box, it looks as if Ferrari have really got it right. Compare Carlos Sainz times on the soft tyre with those of Charles Leclerc. You would imagine Charles would be a little bit slower, and so it is, but a good long run by Charles. Indeed, more laps with fuel in the car, with the medium tyre, than any other runner on the day. Lando Norris also put in a good number of laps in the McLaren. Looked pretty good, also very impressive. Lewis Hamilton also really good in the Mercedes. He was on the medium tyre, so you can compare those his lap times with those of Charles Leclerc. And look, he's pretty much there or thereabout. Top speeds, you could say a little bit slower, but that's kind of to be expected with the Mercedes. But what they're losing in top speed, they're definitely gaining, obviously, in some areas of the lap. And Mercedes, yeah, we can say maybe Canada was the sign of things moving forward, and there is real momentum there, particularly with these upgrades. And there's George on the hard tyre, also very impressive. I mean, look how quick he got towards. It took a while, obviously, for the tyre to come in, but once it came in, he was right up there as well, looking really impressive on the hard tyre. Anyway, that was today. It could be the weather conditions tomorrow might change, might be a little bit warmer. It was quite cold today, but at Silverstone, of course, anything can happen. Only other comment to make, I think, is the welcome to the foot cam we had in Lando Norris's car this morning in FP1. And it was basically behind the throttle, and it was really, couldn't see much of the brake. You could just about see when he was moving the brake pedal, but very difficult to match the two. And in a perfect world, you really want to see brake and throttle simultaneously in the same shot, obviously, but great even to get this. And what struck me there was how Lando there was a lot of playing with the throttle mid-corner, which is what we talk about a lot on this channel. When I talk about suppleness of movement, and I've always included Lando in that, that is a typical example of a driver. It's not this isn't Ayrton Senna, bump, 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 bump. This is nothing wrong with that either. I mean, obviously Ayrton knew what he was doing, but this is Lando mid-corner, just playing with the throttle a little bit, and probably at that moment he's coming out of the brakes a little bit, and probably also he's putting on or decreasing steering lock a little bit. He's just balancing the car mid-corner, finding the perfect moment, managing all those dynamic weights, the perfect moment for rotation. I thought that was a great step forward. They didn't seem to have it running in FP2. It was probably just a test at the moment, but my vote would be continue with that, and let's see if we can get a slightly wider angle and get the brake pedal in. I know it's a very small area, but they got the lighting right, and I'm amazed, given how cramped the footwell area is, that they were able to get that lighting. So full marks to F1 TV for that. Anyway, look forward to see what happens at Silverstone tomorrow. See you then.